Good morning. I'm Pastor Cherry, and I wanted to try to come online to try and give some sort of faith-based response to the coronavirus pandemic that we're all facing. I know that we're Christians, we're spiritual believers, but we live in a very real world, and I wanted to try and give some sort of faith-based response as a pastor to try to help the sheep understand how to best respond. So a couple of things that I wanted to point out to probably help us get through this experience. Number one, we have to remember that God has always acted in concert with mankind and the current time. So I don't want you to have this belief that God is in heaven and only deals with his family of believers and doesn't care about the rest of the world and what's going on. He does, very much so. He's very relevant, and he pays attention to what's happening in the earth. So as the prayer even says, let your kingdom come, let your will be done, where? In earth, as it is in heaven. So he's very cognizant of what's happening in the earth realm, which means that he may respond to what's happening, or he may have influence, or he may have a disposition toward it. So just kind of clearing that up, that God is not bereft or aloof or distanced away from what happens in the earth realm. Secondly, he's never divorced himself from the order of things on earth, meaning that if he systematically and methodically created the earth and the world, and he designed it from the beginning, then he's never divorced himself from the order of things, that he does believe in the order, the cycle, the system of things, and he's cognizant of that as well. Meaning he's not just available and interested in his children and his church only. His church exists in the world, in the earth realm, according to the systems. I mean, we have our church in daytime, in daylight, when it's plausible. We develop our organizations based on how the earth works. So all of that is important to remember. And not only that, but remember also in the Old Testament, God responded to how his people reacted and how the world reacted. So if there was some text that said, a king did what was right in his own eyes, and, he got mad at that. So he responded certain ways based on how the people responded. But when a king did what was right in God's eyes, there was much blessing that came with that. We know that even with the flood, the people at large, it was everyone who weren't really kind of obeying or doing things according to how he planned. And he sent the flood, and he was like, no, I'm not doing that anymore. So I'm not saying we have to worry about that. I'm not saying this is a result of a plague, or this is a result of God's anger, or this is not a prophecy. I'm not saying any of that. I'm just pointing out that God has always responded and has the ability to intervene in every which way he chooses. So I have not heard from him in any way specifically that this is a condemnation, this is a curse, or that I'm not going there. I'm just trying to intimate that God is involved in the order of things and has been since the beginning of time. So we know that even in our own personal lives, when we do what God has asked us to do, he responds favorably. When we don't do what he asks us to do, he responds not so favorably. So keep that in mind. Number 4, I want you to know the world is not all made up of believers. And please don't make people respond the way you think you should respond because you're a person of faith. The world is made up of believers and non-believers and all kinds of people. So you must compensate for that. Do not take one worldview and then just throw it on everybody else. Respect other people's worldviews and, stand up for yours too, though. Don't be disrespected for yours. If you respect theirs, have them respect yours. It's our job then, in light of that, to love people to faith, if possible, and not condemn them to faith. Our goal is not to make people feel so condemned they need to come to faith. Our goal is to love people enough to where they want to come to the faith. So that's important. As for the fear and the panic aspect of this, here are some things we do know. So as people of faith, here are some things we do know. Number one, we are people of faith. So this is, I'm speaking to a believing audience. This is not for the world at large. This is for Christians who believe in God. And I'm saying to you that we are a people of faith, which means that we trust God first and foremost. Our ultimate trust and reliance is on God, not fear. We are not moved by fear, anxiety. There are constant passages in the Bible that teach us not to operate like that. The Bible says the just or the righteous shall live by faith. So we live in a way in which we trust God. So whatever we're experiencing, our first response and first approach to it is not one of fear, but it must be whatever the heck is going on. I trust you, God. I trust you. I trust that it's in your hands. I trust that you have the power to do something about it. I trust that you're able to protect. I trust that you're overseeing it all. That's where our base, our foundation, and our premise should begin. Number two, God is our protector. Remember that God is our protector. Our lives are in his hands. The Bible says in him we move, we live, and we have our being. We move in him, we live in him, we have our being. Nothing will happen to us apart from his will. As long as we're doing our best to stay in his will, he is our protector. God is our refuge and our strength. He is a very present help in the time of trouble. Number three, God has proven in the past to protect from pestilence, from plagues, from diseases, etc. So if you read Psalm 91, that's a very good passage that you can read at this time. I think is very, very appropriate. But we understand that the passage teaches that we can be protected from pestilences, infections, viruses, plagues, diseases, all of that. There are instances in the Bible where God allows people to be protected while other people may be experiencing difficulties and challenges. So we do understand that that is a benefit to us as being people of faith. Number four, while we are spiritual beings, we are subject to earthly bodies and environments. While we are spiritual beings, we are subject to earthly bodies and environments. In other words, we live in earthly bodies. We get sick. We may experience things that challenge us in the world. We may get hurt. Those are realities that you should not discount. So when you think that you're a Christian and you're a believer, don't think that that exempts you from catching the coronavirus or any other sickness or illness that is out there. You have the potentiality of that because you're human. So please don't be naive and think that just because you're of a spiritual faith base that you can't get these things. While God does protect us and he does can allow things to go past us, it is certainly a possibility that we can get them and get those diseases, and it is up to his will. Ultimately, he is our ultimate healer, and that whatever happens to us, we will ultimately in our end times be completely healed of anything. We will never be eternally demised to some sort of sickness or illness. That's a benefit of being with Christ as well. So with that in mind, we must obey and cooperate with the elements in which we live. So do your best to cooperate with the earthly realm. If they tell you wash your hands, tell you to be safe, cough into your arm, do whatever it is you need to do to make sure you don't impact others negatively or to protect yourself from being impacted negatively by others. We live in this world too. Cooperate. Don't just claim the Jesus card and say you're exempt from obeying the laws. Jesus told his disciples and told others, he said, you render unto Caesar what is Caesar's and render unto God what is God's. Cooperate with what is happening in the land. All right. And then number 5, this is the sign of the times. You could look at the sign of the times. We cannot disagree that, things are not moving as positively and as spiritually as we would like them to from a biblical perspective. That, people are doing a lot of things that probably would not line up with the word. We know that and I'm not even talking about just big sins. I'm talking about just going away from being kind to people, going away from being morally sound, having character or integrity, saying bad things to people, hurting people intentionally, bullying people online. I mean, just treating people nasty. I mean, the basics of just being nice to people, I think is enough to upset God in some way. So we're not even talking about lifestyle and sins and all that other stuff. Just talking about the basic human decency of treating people kindly and being nice to them. And then in light of that, then we need to pray that God would have mercy on us, not just the church, but the world, for how we have rejected him, for how we have done our own thing. Pray and ask God to have mercy on us. Ask him to help us get rid of this virus, help us get rid of all other ills like cancer and hatred and racism, the flu, leukemia, AIDS, HIV, all of it. Keep praying, asking him to give not just the coronavirus, but we've got problems that kill us every day in other ways. So we got to be conscious of that. Number 6, my encouragement to you today is not to be fearful, but please be human. Do not be fearful, but please be human. In other words, care about others. Recognize that you live here too. Don't see yourself as spiritually elite and only Christians matter. That's stupid. God cares about all of mankind, and we should have a heart for that too. So I hope this helps. Please be safe and pay attention to what's going on and act according to the word first, and use wisdom as you apply his word to your everyday responses. I'm Pastor Cherry. I just hope that this gives you some idea of how to respond from a faith-based perspective with this new coronavirus we're experiencing. Praying for you, pray for me, pray that we all get well and we get back to normal as soon as possible. Thank you so much. God bless.